Okay, my name is Lisa Cannon. It's March 3rd, 2017. We're here at the Museum of Chincoteague Island with Norma Jones Basham, who is a lifelong Teaguer, I believe. We're going to hear about her life and memories, childhood, anything that she wants to talk about. So, Norma, I'm going to start out. You're Norma Jones Bashir. Tell me where and when you were born.
I was born on Savage Street in June 1932. Well, it might have been Main Street because I don't believe my mother hadn't built her home yet in Savage Street. So it was Main Street.
So what is now Savage was property that your family owned and built on later.
My grandfather owned that.
Yes. And you still live on Savage Street?
Janet does.
Janet does.
Janet still lives on Savage Street.
Right.
And my grandmother's and grandfather's house is still on the corner of Main and Savage.
Oh, really? And Norma, tell me your parents' names, please.
My mother was Lillian Savage, and my father was Norman Jones. And they married in December 1929.
And how about your grandparents' names? Can you recall those?
My grandmother's name was Virginia. On my mother's side was Virginia Savage and Henry Savage. And my grandparents were living on Assateague at that time. And she was Ida Jones, and he was Frank Jones.
And were they born on Assateague, those grandparents?
I don't. My grandmother was born on Chincoteague. My grandmother Savage was born on Chincoteague, and I don't know about my grandmother Jones whether she was born on. I have a feeling she was born on Chincoteague. And Frank would probably know. Frank, I don't know if it's in his memoirs or not. I knew more about my grandparents that lived on the corner of Main and Savage because that's where I went a lot of days after school if my mother wasn't home.
Yes, yeah.
And,
did you go over to visit your Jones grandparents?
I did, but not. I don't remember going over too often. I think by this time they had probably moved to Chincoteague because after my dad left, all the family had moved from Assateague. So I have a feeling that by the time I could remember anything, they were probably already on Chincoteague, and they lived almost on the corner of Pension Street, a little house across from the Baptist Church parking lot. 2 rooms down and 2 rooms up. And the house is still there. It's so cute.
Still there.
And people have added on to it. And I'd love to catch them outside sometime and say, I remember this house.
Right, absolutely. It's not the one that's painted pink.
It's lavender, I think.
So, okay.
It's one house is on the corner, but it's facing church. And the next house is my grandmother's, and that's facing Pension.
Facing Pension. All right, we'll have to go. Because I've been interested in Assateague for a long time, I know that name Ida Jones very well.
She was, I guess, a lot of people depended on my grandmother for spiritual advice mostly, because my grandmother could preach a sermon as well as any minister. And I have a letter that she wrote to one of the Beebes, and I think it was when Miss Ida died, and she wrote it to Ida's daughter. It'll bring a tear to your eye to read the letter. And I don't know how, I don't know, maybe if when they were cleaning out Grandma's house, they gave it to me, and I have kept it.
I bet. I've read that a few of them, there aren't very many memoirs from Assateague, as you probably know.
No,
but people did talk about how all the kids would go to Ida Jones's house to play and just to hang out.
Well, Grandmom had 3 girls, so it was, it's like if you have kids come to your house. Like I had 3 girls, so most of the time I had 6 girls because each one of them would bring a friend home after school. That's probably the reason plus my grandmother was very sweet. and kind. And I can't imagine. I never ever saw my grandmother in a huff or upset, or if we went there and we said, Grandma, guess what happened at school today? Honey, it's all right. This too will pass, and you'll be friends by tomorrow.
Well,
Just let it go. So,
I've heard too that she was you behaved when you were around her because she expected a certain standard.
she did.
And
Sometimes the grandchildren, the older, like, I guess, well, and there was Janet and I and two other grandchildren were the four youngest of all grandmom's grandchildren, because she had a lot of them. One aunt had 11 and one had 7. So there were a lot of grandchildren. And there was always one for your age somewhere. But no, you could always go to grandma's. She always had candy. Because everybody came, when they came to see my grandmother, they always brought her something. So mostly candy. And we always loved candy. So.
Did she? Can you remember anything at all about what she did during the day? Did she have chickens? Did she?
No. No. My grandmother Jones was not the outdoorsy type person. I can remember one of my Jones cousins saying that when they got their wood chopped for the winter, they'd say, let's go down and help Cousin Frank, because they had lots of boys. My grandparents had a lot of girls, only my dad to help chop wood. And you got your wood box filled, and then you got the school wood box filled for the school and for the church, because it was all one building.
Right.
But now my grandmother on my mother's side was the outdoors person. She'd rather be in the garden than be in the kitchen.
Okay, right.
Now, I won't say kitchen because she loved to cook, but she was either cooking or gardening. And she did some work in the evening. You know, they would quilt.
Yes.
My grandmother in the winter always had a quilt going. And but my grandmother Jones, I can't remember her being the person that was always quilting or crocheting. And I don't know why, because certainly that was the only way you got anything back then, was to make it yourself.
Right. What about, so I was going to say for Ida Jones, then living on Assateague was probably a little bit of a hardship. Let's just say she was probably happy to come over to Chincoteague.
I think she was, because for one thing, she lived next door to the church. She could walk there, even in her later years. My dad would stop there in the morning on his way and then walk over with her, or somebody would, you know.
To remind me, Norma, you had your siblings, Janet.
Just Janet and I.
Oh, just the two of you. Okay.
Just the two of us.
Okay.
And I said to her one time, "Oh, if I had one more sister, I'd shoot myself." Because
why would you say that?
Who would have ever thought that my sister, the accountant, would come to Chincoteague and buy a restaurant? Just not like her. She and her husband knew how to do microwave popcorn back then. Well, my sister could cook, but my brother-in-law, my mother called one night and Janet was still at work. It's like 9 o'clock. And he said, "No, we haven't had dinner yet, waiting for Janet." And my mother said, "No, wouldn't you think Janet would at least have something cooked so that he could warm it up?" And I said, "Mom, he's a big boy. He's been in the Navy or Coast Guard for God knows how long. He could go to a store, get something, have it ready for her." Mom thought you ought to have dinner on the table at 5 o'clock.
Right.
So Janet buying a restaurant just blew me out of the water.
Janet, by the way, I remember talking about at one point about going over to Assateague, and you had something funny to say, I think, about why Janet didn't get to go over to Assateague.
Well, Janet said because I was a brat, and she was so shy, she would hide behind you, and like she couldn't stand to see anybody, and would embarrass us. But Janet was too small. I mean, just think, all in the lighthouse now, all that equipment was back in that, when you come in the door to the left, all this stuff running and clicking and
Right.
and then we just had this little room where they had the gift shop.
Mm-hmm.
That was, the bed was in there, the table, and some sort of little thing with a hot plate on it.
Oh, really?
So it really wasn't, Janet was only 3 or 4 years old.
And that's where your father stayed when he was over there
Uh-huh.
doing maintenance.
Yes.
So remind me about your father's connection to the lighthouse again.
Well, he was in the Coast Guard, and during the war, that place was manned 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was on a ship out of Norfolk, and I don't remember what day this happened that my dad got sick. It was late in December of 41. And they took him, they couldn't figure out on the ship what was wrong. So they took him to a hospital on Hampton Boulevard over in Norfolk. And they didn't know what was wrong for a couple of days. And while he was in the hospital, the war started and the ship pulled out. My dad's still in the hospital. He had a kidney stone.
Oh.
So that kidney stone saved him
Mm.
from going out on the ship. And so they transferred him to Assateague
Okay.
Coast Guard station. And since my dad knew every nook and cranny of Assateague, they sent him to do that job.
Oh, so he
So-
had grown up there. Of
He had
course.
grown up there. He knew wherever hiding place was and every little nook and cranny about Assateague. So it was a wonderful job for him.
Interesting.
And of course the Scots still live there.
Mm-hmm.
And they would, it was nice for them too, because when my dad would come back, he'd bring whatever they needed. And then Dad had a boat to get supplies back and forth, and a Jeep, and that was a help to the Scots also.
Mm-hmm.
And we would go down to visit the Scots in the evening.
Oh, did you? What do you
And-
remember about that?
I remember that Mrs. Scott always wanted you to have a nice cold drink of water out of the well.
Oh,
And it was a cup hanging, and everybody drank out of the cup.
sure.
And my mother had said, you know, everybody drinks out of that cup, but you're going to have to drink out of it too. Nobody's died from it, so you'll be fine. And that's what I remember, you know. And she always had some little goodie that we would enjoy in the evening. Maybe my mother would bring a cake or something that would keep, because you had no refrigeration.
Yes, they had nothing. Right?
Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever we brought, it would be like Mother would make a pot of soup or a pot of beans, something that would carry over. And maybe some canned meats. I don't know what you could buy back then, because things were getting scarce.
Yes,
As far as
that's
spam and corned beef and
right.
stuff in cans that you could make do with.
Was Bill Scott still? He wasn't even running his store anymore. at that point.
That was long gone.
Right. Can you remember that what the house was like at all?
I can remember it was a porch in between the kitchen and the main house, as I remember. And we'd sit on the porch, and they always had something burning out in an oil drum or something. And my dad said it was a type of bush that grew over there, and they would put it in this can, and it would send out a smoke that mosquitoes didn't like. And that helped
Interesting.
keep mosquitoes away.
Well, it's kind of like what the Native Americans did with the burning the smudge pots.
Yeah.
I wonder if
right.
it was sumac or.
I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
Just I don't remember the name, but that was another thing. And then this old big home was still on the hill at where the lighthouse is.
Yes, the keeper's mansion.
We rummage around in that.
Oh.
Mom would let me walk through that with her, and
Was nobody was in there?
no, and that piece by piece that disappeared, like the doors, the bathroom fixtures, you know.
Huh.
And but you know, I enjoyed. Dad would take us clamming, and we could steam clams, and we could
Over there on Assateague.
with that little hot plate.
Oh, the little hot plate, right. And of course, Mimey Scott must have had just a wood-burning stove.
Yes, that's the reason you had to have plenty of wood.
Right.
Because it was, I guess it's just too hard to haul coal. And that would have been the only other thing.
That's right. And wood was free.
Wood was free, yep. So they would, as Dad would say, and Lois, my cousin, would say, you had your wood pile and your wood box full by Thanksgiving. And then they'd help get Frank's and Ida's wood box and wood pile, and then on to the church and the school.
Right, right.
So, and then after 6th grade, everybody had to come over here to go to school. So he opted to not come over here and go to school.
No.
And my grandmother didn't think, I don't know why, the girls came over for a while. And the youngest daughter did. In fact, she went to nursing school, my dad's sister in Philadelphia.
Oh, what was her name?
Aline. I don't think the other, I don't remember whether the other kids came over or not.
Did your dad have any stories about that school? Or did he ever say anything about the teacher? Or,
that she was strict, and my grandmother and grandfather would not tolerate foolishness. This was a hard enough job, and you were not to cause any problems. And if you did, you'd have problems at home. But they did things. I remember one time Dad said they turned somebody's toilet over one night.
their outhouse.
Their outhouse. That was a fun thing for whoever was to go the next morning, and that was not upright but on its side.
Did he get in trouble?
They never owned up to who did it. It was just one of those things that happened. Maybe the wind blew it over.
Right.
So that's, I can't think that Dad was, that the kids over there did any real harm.
Oh, no.
No.
Yeah.
Life was too hard. You know, they didn't think it was.
Really? Did he describe it as hard, or did he speak of it?
I thought it was hard.
Yeah.
They didn't think it was hard. It was easy living. You grew everything. You had milk. You had chickens. You had all the seafood you wanted.
Right.
I guess their garden, you know, they grew potatoes, and you think, you know, it's so sandy over there.
Yes.
But some things like a sandy soil.
That's true. They certainly did grow things there. We know that.
Yeah. Because I can remember, like on sheep, when they first started having sheep penning day, that one of the books that I read, I think my Aunt Betty had written that my grandmother had the chickens right there, and she had 3 girls to fry the chicken. So they always had a lot of fried chicken.
So that was Ida. Did you hear about sheep penning at all?
I just said it was a fun day. They made different cakes and had a lot of goodies, which my dad liked. So anytime there was a lot of good, my dad was happy. And I can remember when Dad was coming home for the weekend, you know, Mom always had dessert, chocolate or banana cake if we could get bananas. And I always said, it's one thing when I grow up, I'm going to have all the bananas I want and all the Clark bars. It was 2 of my favorite things.
So you mentioned you when you grew up, you were going to have all the bananas and Clark bars.
You didn't get bananas a lot, and I can remember we had 2 grocery stores right in the creek, side by side almost. Well, they were side by side with a coal pile in between, but somebody would send word to Mother that the store had bananas, and she'd go get some, and of course always a banana cake. And she'd always cut me off a piece, and I just love bananas to this day. I always have bananas.
I heard Roy Jones talk about banana cake too, so that must have been
It was
popular
a
item.
Chincoteague favorite, I think, banana cake.
Do you think people ate more or less the same on Assateague and Chincoteague?
I do. I think a lot of that came over
Sure.
and went over the other way, you know. And a lot of chickens. Of course, you know, back in those days we had chicken houses.
Right.
And my grandmother down Savage Street had 2 chicken houses. Probably 10,000 chickens in the 2 houses.
There at Savage?
Right where Janet's house is.
Oh, okay.
Right where Janet's house. Our house was on one side of Savage Street, and Janet's built on the other side, which was where my grandmother raised chickens. And then my grandfather at one time had a grocery store, which is now a home. So we always had plenty to eat.
Which store did he have?
He had, and I can't think, the restaurant up here that the 2 sisters run on.
AJ's.
AJ's, one of the girls lives over in that house. They turned it into a house.
Okay, and this would be on Main Street? Okay.
In fact, there's the the two houses together that one of the realtors built right there on Main Street, right across
Yes.
from the old Mill Street.
Yes, I know what you're talking
And then the next house was my grandfather's, and the next house was a store.
Oh, okay.
And I guess the storm of the March storm of '62 damaged that a lot.
Oh, I bet.
But somebody bought it. Some of April's people bought it and fixed it up, and that's where April's sister lives.
What was the store called?
Just Savages, I guess.
Savages,
And then there was Twilly's, Count Twilly's,
Yes,
where I worked as a teenager.
Okay.
And then Jack Jester had the store next door to it. So we had, now I don't know if Jack Jester's store was open, or John Jester's, the same time my grandfather had one open or not. But the store, by the time I can remember anything, the store, everything, the showcases and everything was in there, but the store was closed. And then we had a bus service here on Chincoteague for a while, and the people that ran that bus rented that building from my grandfather and had their office in there. Can't remember, it was like Trailways, but a smaller branch of that.
Okay.
So you could go down to the corner right at the bridge and get the bus and go to Salisbury and spend the day and get the bus back. So that was a treat for teenagers back in those days.
Tell me a little bit about school. What was it like going to school here?
It was wonderful. We walked to school. We walked home for lunch. We walked back. In fact, I asked Janet, I said, do you think I can walk from our house at Savage Street, up Main Street to Clark Street, cut through that little section that was Nelson Jester's parents, and make it to the school in 18 minutes? And she said, why? I said, well, that's what I'm going to Planet Fitness, walking on the treadmill, trying to make it in 18 minutes. Right now I'm 18 minutes and 20 seconds. But you can walk faster on the treadmill because you don't have to watch for a crack in the sidewalk.
So did it take you about 20 minutes actually?
I'm thinking it took us about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's why I can eat fast. Because at one time, later on, the guy that was in charge of the maintenance at school lived in the creek, and he had a pickup. And if we were out there when he got ready to go home for lunch, because he lived not far from us, he would give us a ride. So you hurried and got out right at 12:05 to get that ride up the creek, and then you hurried home and ate lunch and get a ride back. So I said, I can eat a 5-course meal in 20 minutes.
Any friends? What friend you mentioned? I think
There's one lady living. She lives off Fleming Road. She was Barbara Tarr. And there's Theresa Savage. He lived up the creek across the street from my grandmother. He's my cousin. And then there's Robert Tarr that's married to Myrna, and they live on Wing Road. And then there's Sam Merritt. He moved, and he lives down the canyon now. But there's 4 of us that played in the creek. The boys rolled a barrel hoop or something, and we roller skated and swim in the creek, and just a good life.
The creek, meaning the little part of...
I'm saying from Taylor Street to where the high school is. That was the creek.
The creek, yes, right.
So we'd go down, jump in the creek, and go for a swim.
Did you know how to swim, Norma?
I can swim, but I'm not an excellent swimmer. Now, the 2 Adams girls that live down closer to Taylor Street, where Reggie Stubbs Motel is,
Yes.
There's a duplex, and 2 girls live there, 2 Adamses. One, the only duplex on Chincoteague. One lived on the right, one lived on the left as you went in the front door. So when you spent the night with one, you spent the night with both of them, and it was great fun. But they could swim like fish, because my mother lived down Savage Street, so she wasn't on the dock watching me, where her father was out there doing the clam thing. So they just jump in anytime and go swimming. So they were both much better swimmers than me, but my father was an excellent swimmer. And my oldest daughter was an excellent swimmer. In fact, he used to take her down to Tom's Cove before they had the pool. They had that little swimming area. And he took her down there, and he came home and said, Susan can swim like a fish. And I said, Dad, she gets that after you and her father, because my husband grew up in Colorado, closer to Kansas. Well, what water did they have? A little creek, maybe, if they'd had some rain occasionally. But my husband was an excellent swimmer. Helped get through kids that went through flight training with him. Helped get them through the swimming part because he could float, and he would let them drag him. You had to be able to rescue somebody. So a couple of the kids were having a struggle with the swimming part. Two of my kids are excellent swimmers. One's like me. Not so
How did
good.
you meet your husband from Colorado?
He said I met him in a bar. I did, over at the Officers Club. There was another widow on Chincoteague, and she was her husband had been killed in a plane crash. So she could go to the Officers Club, and she would
An officer's club here?
on the base.
Okay.
On the air station. See, that was a naval air station.
Yes.
And so once a month they had bingo. And so she would always say, come go to bingo. It's something for us to do. You know, two young widows wasn't much. Yeah. So, and then another time, one of her friends was having a hail and farewell, which you did for new people coming in and those that were leaving. So some of her friends were leaving. So she said, come go with me so I'll be by myself. Well, Jerry's boss was there, and my friend went up and talked to him. And Jerry came in the club to cash a check. And he said, oh, Jerry, come here and meet these two Chincoteague ladies. He's on his way to Ocean City to have fun. So we met a couple of times, and then he called and asked if I'd like to go to the squadron picnic. And that was
how it began.
And then to get married and leave and go to Puerto Rico. I never left Chincoteague. He always says, she put on shoes and we left. I said, excuse me, I did have shoes.
Which you did wear occasionally.
Yeah.
Did kids run around barefoot?
Oh yeah, in the summer we did.
Yeah.
It was hard for me because our little lane was covered with oyster shells.
Oh, right.
And it was hard to walk out to Main Street.
Yeah.
So Mom was not a person that wanted us to go barefooted. She always wanted us to have on shoes. And
that would be a problem.
It would. And I could go out to my grandmother's, and she had a sidewalk all the way around the house, which is still there, and the old gate is still there. If you go up North Main Street and you see, my grandmother's house is still beautiful. They've taken excellent care of it. And they put this white plastic fence around it, but there's the old wooden gate that needs a coat of paint. And it's just been sold. In fact, Janet and I looked at it, and she said, let's buy it. Oh, Janet, honey, what? Come on, get real. But Janet,
someone else bought it.
Yeah, and they've done they put new windows in the attic. You can go to the attic and you have a view of the channel.
I bet.
But no, honey, it's not something I want to take on again.
So those were the Savages on that house. Yeah. So you went and lived in Puerto Rico.
I did. And then California.
Oh, my.
And then Jerry got stationed aboard the Forrestal out of Norfolk. And so we finally got back to the East Coast. And he was on the Forrestal. I'm sure you all don't remember this, but it blew up in the Gulf of Tonkin during the Vietnam War. They almost lost the ship.
Oh, my gosh.
But they made it to the Philippines and then on back. 100 and some people were killed on the ship that day.
But he survived.
He survived. Yes, he did. My husband's been blessed with good health. He flew 20 years and never had an accident. And my parents did not want me to marry him because I was married to a guy from Chincoteague, and he had a nice job at the base, and I worked at the base. And at 29, he died with cancer. So my mother thought, you're going to marry a pilot, and like I said, my friend's husband had just been killed in a plane crash. But, you know, it was all intended.
And by the time you got back here, was he retiring then, or did he take up some
when we got
more?
to Norfolk, no. He had 3 tours, and 2 tours in Norfolk and 1 in Adak, Alaska, which they had base housing for us to go. But one of my daughters had croup real bad, and the doctor said, she's going to go crazy in Adak because of the volcano ash and wind. I wish you wouldn't go. So my husband looked into it. He could go 18 months unaccompanied or 3 years with the family. So he opted for the 18 months, and I stayed in Norfolk and Chincoteague. In the meantime, we bought the Ben Franklin store, if you can.
Yes, now I never knew the Ben Franklin store.
It was a
Tell
great
me a little bit about that.
It
Where
was
was
a-
it?
It was where Kevin McBride has one
Oh.
half of it. The other half was the Ben Franklin store, and it had been there for over 25 years when we bought it, and we had it for 32 years.
Oh my goodness!
In fact, I was telling Debbie that's how her brother and my husband met. They had met in Norfolk. He was Jerry's plane captain, and neither one of them knew their history of Chincoteague. And my husband would come up on the weekends with me, and he'd clean the windows and do whatever maintenance he could do. And he was cleaning the windows when Debbie's brother walked by and looked at my husband and said, and Theresa, we own the store. And he said, oh my gosh, really? But my mother-in-law, by my first marriage, was working at that store when Mrs. Cobb, who was the owner after her mother passed away, they were all working, and Lucille's husband had some health problems. So she basically turned the store over to the help. She went in and got the bills and made major decisions on what new to buy. But basically those three ladies ran it. So when my mother-in-law said to me, why don't you and Jerry buy the dime store? I thought, are you kidding? So we did.
But was it fun?
It was fun. It was fun. And it gave me something to do when Jerry was gone, because Friday afternoon, as soon as the kids got out of school, I was right up here. Went back Sunday afternoon, and in the summer, practically stayed up here.
Yeah, yeah. And where were you living then, Norma?
My husband and I, first husband, had built this house on Ridge Road, which we still own.
I see.
And we kept the house and still have it.
I see.
So my mother and father moved from their house on Savage Street in with me after my husband died to see if I wanted to keep it or sell it. We had a couple people interested in it. My mother said, you should live here for a year before you make a decision. Since the house was completed in 1956, and he died in 56. So we had never moved in the house.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
We had in fact, when he started having trouble with his back, they thought we were rearranging the furniture, but we didn't. When we bought the furniture, we knew exactly where it was going to go. And so that wasn't the problem.
Well, you've had an interesting life.
We have, for the little girl from Savage Street. It's been fun. It's been wonderful. My sister and I both have been blessed with good health. So she's 77. You needn't say I told her age. But if she was 3 or 4 when I was 10 or 12, we can
do the math.
But we have.
What would you say are some changes that really come to mind about Chincoteague at this point?
The town itself. When we were growing up, you could get everything from my dad used to call them a slouch hat. Now, I don't know the proper name for that. A man's dress hat, which all the older men wore when they went to church. You could buy shoes, you could buy a suit of clothes, the dime store had most anything you would need, like from household equipment to clothing from underwear for men and women, yarn, material, sewing notions, carpet for or what we call linoleum rugs, came in a big roll, and you bought it and rolled it out. Put something heavy on it to get the roll out of it for a while, and paint, and
my goodness,
just so many things that you could. There were 3 clothing stores, Ralph Selby, which is part of the building with the Island Theater.
Yes.
The store that Kevin's in was a clothing store. The little freestanding store across from the dime store are Kevin McBride's. I don't know what's in there now. That was a ladies' shop. Had nice clothes. You could get a nice Sunday outfit, or you could get something to wear to the beach. You could get shoes. You could get hose. You could get... Oh, and there was a children's store, too, at one time. in part of what is the little mall. If you're
Yes.
facing the dime store and Kevin McBride's, it's the farthest store to the old bank building, not the old bank building, but
Right.
the candy store.
Yes.
There was a nice little children's store there. We just had we had not much in restaurants, but there was always a place, like the pharmacy, you could get a Coke and a pack of nabs after movies.
Mm-hmm.
You could go restaurant, I think it's a t-shirt shop on the corner of Cleveland and Maine. It was Louise's. And you could go in there and they had the best tuna fish sandwiches. Miss Mary Bunting worked there. And after she would come in the dime store sometime, I'd say, oh, I could go for one of those tuna fish sandwiches. She said, rinse your tuna fish. When it opened the can, rinse it.
Oh.
Never tastes like Miss Mary's. She had a secret that
has gone with her, apparently.
But, you know, we could walk everywhere, which we did. There were very few cars. Our family, my dad had one because of being in the military. But Janet and I one time counted the cars from Taylor Street to high school. I think we counted 5 or 6 cars in that span of, you walked everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Was Main Street paved when you were walking?
It was, and there was a sidewalk.
Uh-huh.
Sidewalk. Yeah. I can always remember it being paved and having sidewalk.
So the street was paved and you actually, even though there weren't many cars, you had a sidewalk part of the way to school at least.
We had sidewalks all the way.
All the way.
Until Dan Clark Street, and then there was a little dirt path, we called it, that wasn't even, I guess a car went down there, but that was the only section we walked on that wasn't paved. So, but growing up in Chincoteague, you couldn't have had a better place to grow up because you felt, we walked home from the carnival.
At night.
At night.
Sure.
The only thing my mother ever said, and I think everybody told their kids the same thing, don't get in cars with sailors.
I think I was told that too.
And my dad was a sailor.
Oh.
And I married a sailor, so, but anyway, back in those days, don't get in the car. And then at one time we had a little army base.
Yes, Camp Fletcher.
On the corner of Ridge Road and Church Street. But they never said don't get in the car with an army guy. They just said a sailor. So probably more sailors. And of course, the Pony Pines was in full swing back then. So a lot of sailors came over and went to Pony Pines. And also what we call the lollipop. You know.
I don't know that.
You don't know the lollipop. It's where the new Jack Spot restaurant is. It was, Mr. Turlington had it. And it was like a place that fishermen hung out. But it seems to me sailors might have gone down there because I think they sold beer. And there wasn't a lot of places that sold beer on Chincoteague.
Yes.
But then it was a restaurant, Harold Quillen bought it, and somebody else with Harold Quillen, and then Paul Tatum bought it at one time and really fixed it up, and it was a very nice restaurant. And then after Paul, somebody bought it from Paul, but we knew that it was going to be torn down, which I thought was sad.
So, did you go there as a child, though?
No.
So
it wasn't a place young people
Yes,
went.
right.
And Pony Pines wasn't even a place young people went. And I can remember the year I came home from State Teachers College, one of my other classmates that was going to school across the bay, she was home. And some of the girls that lived here, we all went to Pony Pines. But it wasn't, even as a young adult.
Really? It was a little rough.
My mother wouldn't have approved. It had calmed down a lot, but it wasn't a place I would have said to Mom, I went to Pony Pines tonight. It was kind of on the QT. And it wasn't anything wrong. You know, we just went there. They had a jukebox, and we probably danced with each other.
Yeah. But there weren't a lot of places to go, as
Oh,
you
no.
said.
If you didn't go to the movie or you didn't go down to the American Legion, at that building was what we hung out in because it had ping pong tables and it had a jukebox. It had a soda fountain because you could go in there and get a Coke, put a nickel in the jukebox and dance.
When you were a young teenager, high school age.
High school. In fact, my junior senior prom was there.
Was it called American Legion then, or was it?
You know, I can't remember, but they must have owned the building and maybe just let it be a teenage hangout. Because like I said, it wasn't much for young people to do.
No, it sounds like it. So what did you do for fun?
Well, a lot of church activities. You know, you sang in the choir even if you couldn't sing because Tuesday night was choir practice, Sunday night was church. And after that, you could go downtown and have a soda. So you could go, this place I told you, Louise's, on the corner of Cleveland and Maine, you always went to Louise's and had a soda. So you got out 2 nights a week. And then Saturday night, if you did well in school, you could go to the movies on Saturday night. But if you dropped down to a C, you didn't get to go to the movie till the next report card came out.
Oh, that was a good motivator.
That was a very good
How often did you get report cards?
Every 6 weeks.
Every 6 weeks.
So you were in the house on Saturday night for 6 weeks, which was not fun. The only fun was if I couldn't go to the movies, I'd go with my mom and dad down to my grandmother Jones's on Saturday night because that's when the other sisters would come to my grandmother's. Those kids that weren't old enough to go to the movie would come with their parents. So we'd go to my grandmother's. And then across on Church Street was a grocery store. So we'd have a nickel and we'd go over there and get some candy. And Grandma would let us have the kitchen to ourselves.
So was this Grandma Jones or Grandma Savage?
Jones.
Grandma Jones. So when she was back here on Chincoteague Island,
we'd go to visit on Saturday night.
Yes, okay. Okay.
So that was about our entertainment. And then the high Y clubs that were in school. We'd have a high Y meeting, and then we had a very good high Y leader. She took us to New York on a trip. And on 2 occasions we went to New York. And there was a guy from Chincoteague who was the manager of the Pennsylvania Hotel in New York. And his brother was the Mumford that owned Pony Pines.
Okay.
So
an entrepreneur.
he would look out for us. The head of the school would let them know that, it was the Chincoteague group coming.
And did you stay there? Oh, how nice.
Go right into Pennsylvania Hotel. Look, she's back already. So anyway, it was wonderful. See, she lived in Ocean View, and it wasn't as great as living on Chincoteague.
Did you know Lillian Mears Rue?
She was my 6th grade teacher. She was also the aunt of my first husband. So we were related by marriage.
What was she like, Norma?
She was a fun person. Strict, very strict. In fact, I was the one she named in her will to take care of her affairs. So she and her brother, she had a brother live in Sawyer who was a teacher and coach up at the high school. And when she asked me to do this, I said, Miss Leon, let Sawyer do that. No, he'll throw all my stuff out.
Oh my, that was quite something. All her papers and
Yeah, I said, I'll never do this again. I didn't know so much paperwork involved in Accomack. And, but anyway, I have some things that was Miss Leon's, but I have some flower pots that I'm sure came from maybe the Ben Franklin store, either in Chincoteague or Parksley. But one day, Sawyer wanted me to meet him over there. She lived on 13, on the corner of Thornton Road and 13. And I went over, and he had been in and cleaned out all of her flowers. And there was these old flower pots laying out there. So right away, I get the flower pots and put them in my station wagon. He said, what are you going to do with all that? I said, well, my husband likes flower pots. So we got the flower pots, and then Miss Leon had lived there since 42, I think. So she had no kids, but she was sort of a pack rat, too. And we had a lot of cleaning out to do. And Sawyer said, I'm just I'm going to give the furniture, I'm going to leave the furniture with the house. So anything you want, take. And what am I, I've got 2 houses full of furniture. But I did take her desk. She had one of those desks with the doors, I forget what you call them, the glass doors up at the top.
A secretary?
Secretary. Had 2 drawers underneath. Well, Miss Leanne used it. It was pretty beat up. But Janet's husband was living then, and I said, Jerry, I think I'd like to have Miss Leanne's desk. And he said, oh, you can't get it home. It's too big. I went and measured that thing. I put the seats down in my station wagon. I said, Jerry, it'll slide right into my station wagon. So my brother-in-law took it to Pennsylvania and refinished it, which took away some of the antique part of it. But it's a beautiful piece, and I have it in one of my bedrooms that has that same wood furniture.
That's nice to have. She's a famous person.
Yes, she wrote a book.
Yes.
And we sold them for her at the dime store.
Chincoteague and Chincoteague, as I remember them.
And when you were in her class in 6th grade, she always made a point of getting some way to take you to Assateague for the day. And my aunt and uncle lived on Pawnee Island. Not Pawnee Island from off of Maddox.
Yes. But
Pawnee Island. And we'd all meet over there. And she would get a barge, and my uncle would tow us over, and we'd walk over to the ocean, spend the day. Some days it was beautiful, some days it wasn't. I remember one year it was kind of a dreary, because it was always the Monday after Memorial Day, because we had that day off from school. And she'd take us over, and I remember some of us had jackets on, but we went. We had that sandwich with us. So one we hadn't had ptomaine because you didn't have any refrigeration. Right. And back in those days, I really didn't like peanut butter because it was not homogenized. It was still the oil on top, and you had to mix it. And spiced ham was the favorite, or bologna, But
when you went over there, were there buildings? Can you remember?
Miss Scott was still there. We'd stop at her house and get a cold drink of water
from Miami,
off the same cup, and then we'd walk over to the surf. If it was warm enough, we'd swim. If it was cold, we'd just wade, and then come back about 2 o'clock. And my mother never wanted me to go swimming because I wasn't a good swimmer at that point. And she said, just wade. And we'd pick up shells and, do something.
And Miss Lillian would talk to you about the history of Assateague.
And she would always visit with the Scotts, but she'd always walk with us to the beach. She was a very good sport. She was also my Sunday school teacher from 16 years on until she died, or quit teaching. She was our Sunday school teacher. And she was always wanting to know where my husband was. And he was left to fish on Sunday. And I didn't dare tell her that, but, Anyway, after he died, she was very nice to me. And so was my mother-in-law. It was a very nice arrangement with the family, even after I married Jerry.
Yes, it sounds
when we came home, we always went to her house for a meal. She always spent the night with us on the ridge on Christmas Eve. She left me her home on Willow Street. Not many mother-in-laws leave you a home. So,
well, Norma, something I wanted to ask you about is, what do you think are some characteristics of Chincoteague people?
we're honest, we're hard workers, and we'll tell you like it is. Sometimes it's not what you want to hear, but if you ask, you're going to hear it. So, good or bad. Mostly, you could leave your doors open. You could leave your car doors unlocked. You could leave your windows down. You could leave stuff in the car. I don't ever remember people locking their doors. It was just a wonderful, wonderful place to grow up.
Do you think it's changed quite a bit?
Yeah. It has, but I think we're still lucky. Now, like I said, my daughter and son-in-law had bought a house on Scott's Lane, and I didn't even know where Scott's Lane was. But anyway, right close to where my mother-in-law lived on Willow Street, right next to the Clark Cemetery. My brother-in-law My son-in-law went and got a haircut from the little barber shop, and he came home and he said she was robbed. She was robbed, the little restaurant was robbed, and a car on Maddox Boulevard. But they caught whoever. I mean, that's just so unusual. Now, if you leave your door open now, maybe, but they broke in. But they caught whoever it was. They weren't from here. But see, we have people that aren't Chincoteaguers now.
It's a tourist economy.
It's people that we don't know, you know. But growing up, you knew everyone.
Yes.
In fact, you didn't do anything because by the time you did it, your parents knew about it. And we didn't even have a telephone. So how did they find out? You had to be on your P's and Q's, as we used to say.
Right.
And anything you did that wasn't what you should have done, your parents would know about it. And then you wouldn't get to go to the movies for another 6 weeks.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, Norma, thank you so much. This has just been a joy. Is anything else that you'd like to mention about growing up here that we didn't
No, that only had to babysit Janet, too. That was another one of my chores.
You had to babysit you. That's right.
That was it.
Did she mind you? Did she behave?
She had to, because Mother, I would say, Janet, you didn't say I'm not taking care of her anymore. Mom, Janet wasn't good.
And that was it. Yeah.
Well, she was harder on me than Janet.
Yeah.
Because I was the first, and I was supposed to be perfect, I guess. And then Janet came along, and Mom was older and easier. Much easier.
I think that's a classic story. Yeah.
So there's always this commercial on TV where the first child of the person that's on TV, she's got the stroller, she's got the diaper bag, she's got a spray, she's got loaded down, and the next one she's got the kid by the hand and a little bag over her shoulder. That's it. So that's what happens after your second child. That happened after my second one, I'm sure. So, well, it was nice talking to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
And Debbie, and the new,
Very interesting.
the new person,
director, Maria.
The new museum director.
museum director.
Yeah.
And where did you grow up?
You know, something that I've been confused about that you just said. So you crossed the channel to get over to Asitude, and then you said you'd go play in the surf. How long did it take? In those days, was the surf pretty close?
Well, I would say maybe it was a 40-minute walk.
Oh, okay. So it was a little bit of a walk.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a walk.
Right.
And all I can remember was stay out of the sandbars. Oh, my Lord, I hated those things. You know, they get in your sock.